Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
You cannot have effective pay transparency without education at all levels of the organization. Don't just put it on your managers, but everybody needs to have some level of education, and all of that should be documented and written down so people can go back and relook at it and ask questions. But yes, I do think that even without the law being the law, and there's going to be more pay transparency laws being passed in and out of the US, it's happening in Canada every day now. I do think there should be a level of transparency.
Honestly, what I do for work is probably the least interesting thing about me. And I'm sure some of your employees feel the same way. There's so much more to your employees than just their job titles or what they do day to day. Take Shane in marketing, he's not just about writing emails, or Ashley in HR, she's not just about payroll and benefits. Every employee has a story. They have talents, motivations, and potential waiting to be unlocked. And the predictive index helps you understand them all, not just the role they play. It creates stronger managers, happier teams, and we all know when you truly understand your people, your business actually performs better. Want to learn more? Head over to trypi.com/IHateItHere. Welcome back to another season of the I Hate It Here pod. This season, I'm flipping the script a little. I'm a self-proclaimed dork who loves learning, maybe a little too much, if you ask some people. And I like to deep dive into all sorts of topics. And this season, I want to bridge the gap between my many interests and HR because there's so much more to me and my guests than HR. So think of this season as a challenge. I want guests to surprise me, stump me, or make me rethink what I thought I knew. And maybe we'll discover something new together this season. Joining me today is someone I love to collaborate with and someone who I trust to make me think differently about things. My good friend, Sarika Lamont. Sarika is a people executive known for scaling and growing global businesses. She leads the entire people function, including talent acquisition, talent development, total rewards, performance, and DEI for Vidyard. You can find her on LinkedIn sharing her hot takes about all things HR, and she was recently named a top LinkedIn voice in HR and culture change. Sarika, welcome back to the pod.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. You know, you and I together, it's always something spicy. I was listening to this intro. First of all, I love this approach that you're taking. I think
Thanks.
I like, you're always keeping it fresh, you're always keeping it new, something to like, but also I'm like, wait, I am trying to come in here and like teach you something that you don't know, or maybe about HR, but I did not come in with that. I came in like, I'm going straight HR nerd on you. Like I'm going deep.
You'll probably teach me something still. You teach me something every time I talk to you. Come on, be serious.
That's so sweet. I think we teach each other. That's the power of our community.
We're such dorks. Everyone thinks it's like,
we are cheesy and such dorks, but also we equally mean it. Like we're the authentic cheese that you will never knew you needed in HR.
We're the fun dorks, actually, is how I like to call it.
I was like, I'm not like a regular dork. I'm like a cool dork.
Well, now being dorky is cool. So this whole season is going to be fun for us.
I know.
There's a question I want to ask every guest this season, and it has really nothing to do with HR. And it's just, I want to know from you, what is one area or topic that you are just really interested in right now?
Wow, that...
I mean, you have a lot of interests. I hear about them all the time.
I don't know if that's true. What is one area that I'm really interested in right now? I have been on a little bit of a wellness journey that you probably can't tell quite yet. It's a work in progress.
Doing great.
I have like learned a lot about myself, my body. I've like diagnosed with chronic Lyme recently. I don't know if I should even be saying that on the pod, but whatever. I'm pretty open book. Like diagnosed with chronic Lyme, and with Lyme comes a lot of co-infections and a lot of other things that honestly in some part are like 0% surprising, just because there's just so much in our environment, so much terrible stuff in our food. I know a lot of people have been following that. And so it has taken me down a little bit of this journey. I also think I am incredibly type A. If you know me, that's going to come as 0% surprise. I'm like a recovering extrovert. I still think I'm an extrovert, but I think I'm less of an extrovert as I was pre-COVID. And then I think COVID sort of like really brought me back, like grounded me a little bit, which was good. but I take on a lot of stress, and I'm just like, my cortisol levels are like constantly spiking, which is very unhealthy, especially as I'm aging. I'm not as young as I once was.
Aren't we all?
So yes, I have been on a bit of a spiral to try and figure out like what is wrong and how I can improve my health, but in the most like natural, holistic way. Like rather than taking a bunch of like pills with chemicals. Like I bought a sauna recently, and I have a sauna in my basement that I go in, 3 to 5 times a week, sometimes more, depending. I'm trying to get back into better exercising, but a different kind of exercising. Like I've always liked really high intensity workouts. I love weightlifting, but high intensity is not great when you have, especially for women who are like getting older and dealing with perimenopause and with your hormones imbalance. It's like actually not great for you to like spike your cortisol levels. So I'm just learning a lot about what wellness looks like being a little bit older than I once was, and how do I get myself back. And I would say like a lot of that is also just like personal boundaries. Like I've been off now. It'll be 2 weeks by the time I get back to work on Monday. And I used to do that in previous companies, but it has been really good for me to take these 2 weeks off where like I took Slack off my phone. I
Wow.
haven't been I know that's crazy. I have not been hadn't been checking my emails. I've been trying to be like super present with my children. I have slept a lot. I have been organizing and decluttering my life, because I found that I think clutter like really contributes to my anxiety. So my office has been in like clean mode. Like a lot of things are like I'm simplifying. So yeah, I think a lot of it is also just boundary setting. I'm not great at that, on both personally and professionally. So yes, that was long winded. Wellness is definitely an area that is definitely, I know you and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah, I think very relevant to like a lot of the people at the beginning of the year choose this time to like make a resolution, and to each their own. I feel like I'm always making resolutions, honestly. It's like
I won't do it.
every
Like
day is a new resolution for me. Like, don't scream at someone.
I started to go down a resolution of like, I'm going to eat breakfast every morning,
I love that.
and I'm going to have protein within the first hour of me waking up, because I got
Yeah,
really bad at like just not eating breakfast, and then the
same.
workday starts, and then I just find I'm like it's 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten anything, and that is
Same.
awful for our metabolism.
Yep.
But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to set a resolution, because I always feel like I put a
Too
lot of
much.
pressure on myself. So I think
Yes.
it's just going to be like, I want to be the healthiest, most present version of myself, for myself first and foremost, but also like for my children. Like I need to be able to stay active and energetic for my children. And that is what I'm prioritizing. So there's no resolution. It's just like I'm ongoing learning and trying to get like 1% better every day.
I love that. I set one little goal this year. Usually I don't, but I did this year. I just want to walk for an hour every day. I just want to
I
walk
think
and
that's
move
great.
my body because, like,
Or like get like,
yeah,
7,500 steps in a day. My best friend's doing that one.
I would wake up and like just roll from my bed to my computer, and then again not look up until lunchtime, or even like again 3 p.m. and be like, "Holy cow, I haven't eaten today, or had a lick of water, or done anything but answer emails and glue myself to this computer."
Which is why I always find the topic on like remote work and people not being productive when they remote work so
Ridiculous.
fascinating. Because I'm sitting here like, what? I've been remote working basically since COVID thrusted me into it. And then obviously the jobs I've taken from that one have been remote. I work more now and I'm way more productive now than I ever was before. And I think my productivity just like waned to a lot of extra hours into the night, like from my previous job when we were like in office. I work so much, and I like can't find the opportunity to step away from my computer a lot of days, because I'm in calls so much, meetings so much, and then when I don't, and I'm not in meetings, I'm like trying to catch up with things. It's like, so yeah, I don't get that, because that's not my life. That's not my vibe. I like this thing is like this computer is connected to me.
Yeah, I feel like I'm attached to it. I have Slack on my phone. I need to change that. We'll see. Hopefully, we've inspired people to set a
Slack is back
resolution.
on my phone.
Okay, okay.
It's like, well, it will be. I just took it off for these 2 weeks to like really cleanse my soul.
Okay, well, maybe, someone will listen to this and they'll be inspired to take it off their phone permanently. Could never be me. Maybe I will work to that in 2026.
Um, I think that is a really tall order when you are in a leadership position or an executive position. I think you sort of don't. I know that we're going to have some of our HR besties who are not going to agree with me on this, but it's like when you are the head of people or the CPO or whatever, like in a leadership role like that, I think it's really difficult to not be accessible. And I believe that it is like part of my role to be able to be accessible. And I think Slack is the way that my company chooses to communicate predominantly. Like we don't do email as much as we do Slack. And
Same.
so I got to meet people where they are. And I think that like, I am compensated, which is a great topic because we're going to segue into compensation, but I'm compensated very well and fairly and equitably. And part of the expectation of in my job description is a different level of like scope and impact. And I think I need to be accessible for the business for that reason. So
you never know when something's going to pop up. Like my CEO is really good about not contacting me like at 8 p.m., but he's also in Central Time. So there are times where he's like calling me at like 5 and it's 6 my time. And somebody else might be like, oh my God, I can't believe you answer a call at 6. And I'm like, of course I'm going to answer a call at 6. It's 5 p.m. his time.
I think you just have to, I think you set ground rules and you set boundaries. And I've been bad about that before, but I have to say, like in my organization that I'm at today, we're all really respectful, especially across the executive team. Like I have not heard, the only time I've heard from anybody, any of my executive peers, was to wish each other like a happy new year or like a Merry Christmas, right? Or a happy holiday. Like that was it. None of us have reached out for work-related things. I think all of us really needed the break, including our CEO, like in our other, both our co-founders. Everybody needed a break to come back in 2025, like ready to just like tackle the year. And so, again, I think there's a way to be able to be accessible and have that and feel like that's part of your role, but also do that in a way that is like respectful by setting the right boundaries.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, now to segue to our conversation of the hour. I need to stop singing. I need to stop singing on these goddamn podcasts. Someone is going to be like, stop it.
No, people love it.
I want to talk to you about compensation today. I want like a masterclass in compensation from you, my favorite person. And you have been going in on LinkedIn with your content about compensation, and everyone is loving it. People are like, oh my God, this is so helpful. It's like such an area of people that I think is like somewhat misunderstood, but a lot of HR leaders are getting really smart about it now. And I do think, as you and I have said on so many things, it's the foundation of everything. So
I agree.
I wanted to like a little you're gonna teach me something. I know it today. Little masterclass in compensation. So let's start with a definition, my favorite. Can you explain what compensation and total rewards means in simple terms?
Yes. So compensation, when I hear it's your cash bonus, it's like what you make in like your dollars and cents essentially. So it's your base salary, it's your bonus if you get a bonus, and then it's equity or stock options. That is what is meant when you just talk about compensation, period. However, total rewards is much more encompassing and holistic, where it's not just about the financial compensation and the financial rewards, it's the non-financial rewards as well. So your benefits is part of that, your whole host of benefits, right? All types of benefits that you get. So healthcare, your medical, your dental, your vision, but also 401k, your matching, or if you're in another country, there's different terms for that. It is also like the career growth opportunities you get in an organization and the opportunities that you have to grow, like whether it's career paths or like, am I in a startup and I'm going to be able to move quickly and learn quickly and like do a lot of different things, right? It is also like the work-life perks, like whether that's PTO, unlimited or not, remote working, flexible hours, like what kind of perks do they provide that really help you to like balance work and life or integrate work and life. It's also elements like mentorship, promotions. I mentioned training and development, any stipends for that. Other non-financial rewards, like my company gives days off every year to volunteer and give back to your local communities. So it is all of those things. It's even the culture of the organization, right? And the culture is not, oh, I get free food at lunch. Like that's not culture, but that is a perk. That could be a perk that you get, and that could be what someone classifies as their total comp. But I think it's also culture in the context of like, how do we work? How transparently we operate? How do we communicate with one another? How do we reward and recognize one another? So that is what total comp is. It's all of it.
Love that. It's so interesting because I think HR people do really understand this part. And I think like the part that is the hardest, is like getting employees to understand that.
Yes.
And we'll get to that in a bit, but I want to start with employees and payment. Like, how do you decide what employees should be paid? Like, what factors are you considering when you're
Yeah.
building your compensation philosophy and paying employees?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is, there are a number of factors you have to consider, which is why I always say that, when you look at compensation as like a discipline, it's a pretty strategic approach. It's intended to
Yeah.
be, right? Because there are so many factors and it's a balancing act. And I always say, you've always heard me say it's an art and a science. So, I would say the different things you have to think about. I mean, overall, this is all rooted in like, what is the company's budget? And what are the company's goals? Like, what are your organizational goals? And how much budget do you have to be able to invest in the cash, the financial components, and then the non-financial components? But as you know, some of these non-financial components also cost the business money. So like, first and foremost, it's like you want to make sure we'll get to this, but you want to make sure you have a compensation philosophy to really guide those decisions. But you need a job description, and the job description is super important because it makes the hiring manager, the business, et cetera, be very clear on like, this is the role that we're looking for. This is the complexity and the scope that this role is going to carry. This is the impact that it has to the business goals, to revenue or not revenue, depending on the role. But really every job has an impact to revenue, whether directly or indirectly. And it's what are the like actual like responsibilities this role is going to have. That is the starting point in a lot of ways, because that is what you're going to then take and then assess against the market. And so the next piece of what you look at is like, you need market data. So you need to look at like salary data or bench, right? Because you need to benchmark that role in the context of what does the market bear to pay for that cost of labor. And that cost of labor is a very important concept in this, right? It's like, what do you pay for this particular label? Not necessarily the person, but like, what does like a product manager, an intermediate product manager cost in the market right now?
Yeah.
Now, the other element of this that we could dive into is like, how do you actually use that information? How do you benchmark? Well, you have to make sure that when you're benchmarking roles and you're looking at market data, there's a lot of market data out there from a lot of companies. You got to think apples to apples. And what I mean by that is, if you're like a 150 person startup, whatever, 100-person startup, maybe or whatever, Series A, Series B, whatever that might look like, you're a small organization. And let's say you're a SaaS organization, you're not going to compare yourself, and you're never going to win if you're trying to compete dollar for dollar against an Amazon or a Google. And I think companies, HR is they understand that a lot better than the employees do, right? Or candidates in the market don't always understand that. And so like, it's important that this as part of education around compensation, which we'll talk about momentarily, is like, you got to make sure that people understand it's apples to apples comparison. And so that's why understanding who your company is and how you're going to compete in the market is super important. And that gets rooted and documented in your compensation philosophy, because you're going to decide, am I going to be leading the market? Or am I going to be lagging the market? Am I going to be somewhere in the middle? Do I know that I only have so many dollars and cents to invest in like the financial components, like the cash components, such that there are other elements of the business or other parts of this total rewards package or total, comp package that I need to over index on, because I know that I can't afford to pay as much in base salary. Right. And so like, this is why this is important, but this is important to stay like apples to apples. You also have to take, if you're hiring from someone outside coming in, you have to take the candidate's experience into consideration, because and also some companies may or may not, depending on where they are in their sort of scale of business. But I believe that everybody should have this, even if they're just a 5-person company. It's a job architecture, because the job architecture will basically catalog, these are all the jobs that I have. And then these are the salary bands that I also have, that I've built inside the business. And each job will reside in a salary band. But so every job that you go out to hire will have a target range in which you're going to hire from. That's different than what the budget is. The budget might be, you may have a little bit more budget. You always want to make sure that your target hiring range is a subset of your broader budget for that role. You don't want to put it all out there, because then you don't really have any breathing room, plus or minus. And so your target hiring range is taken into consideration if I choose to hire someone that is like, would be their first time in this role, I'm going to hire them lower on my hiring range and lower in my band. Or I really need someone that has had some like cycles in this role. Like they've been a product manager before, they've got experience. So I want to hire someone with a little bit more experience. So I might bring them closer to the midpoint of the range and of the band, because I'm rewarding that individual because they have had experience in doing this, which you'll find when you go through the interview process. It's not just looking at someone's resume. Right. And so, and I don't look at experience, by the way, by like years of experience. I am like, that's where the interview is really, really important. And we do a lot of like skills-based and competency-based interviewing in an organization, because then we have a very clear understanding on like, where might we bring this person in our hiring range, because I have a better sense for like what experience they bring to the table. And so that's the other element. And then of course, in all of this, you always have to consider internal equity. Right. And so you always want to make sure when you're bringing people into the organization and you have like other intermediate product managers, that you look at everything from all different factors. And yes, DEI really comes into play here, where you want to make sure that you're looking at genders, you're looking at age, you're looking at whatever all the different factors are that you look at to make sure that you're being super equitable. I think one that people look at a lot is like gender. Like, are we making sure that we're not paying our, males higher than females in this particular role? So then that also comes into play. And so when I say this is a blend of art and science, I really mean it, because there are so many factors that you have to take into consideration. But the foundational elements are always like, make sure you have a job description, make sure you level the job accordingly, and then you look at market data and you make apples to apples comparisons.
Yeah. I mean, pay compression is very real, where you go out and try to hire for the same role, but at the time, either the market is valuing it more or you're forced to pay more than what you're paying someone currently in seat.
Yes.
And I watch that very carefully. So like, I always look at our candidates, our employees internally against any open roles we have, and they are always within the band. They're never outside the band. And if they're outside the band, then it's a conversation of, we need to bring our internal people up to match what we're going out and getting in the market. The market is really interesting right now, because I feel like a lot of people, it's been a hard year. It's been a hard, honestly, year and a half. We've seen a lot of people lose their jobs. We've seen layoffs at major companies. And I think there's like these whispers, and no one's really talking about it, and I wish more people would. But there are these whispers from some founders that are like, great, now I can pay people less because the market is so bad, people will take any job.
And that I have not seen, I have heard the same things. I am very fortunate that I don't sit in an organization where my leaders talk like that.
Same.
Thank the Lord. Yeah. But I will also tell you that is not entirely true. Being as though I own talent acquisition in our organization, in terms of like, I have oversight of the function, and I'm involved in, I know what all the offers are that are going out, and I know what negotiations may or may not be happening. And that is actually not entirely true, that people are willing to take less, at least in a lot of the conversations that I've been brought into. And maybe like as of late, if I'm even looking at like more senior leadership level roles, that's actually not entirely accurate. And I think that is a shift from the last time I saw a downturn in the market.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is, I still find this market to be easier from a compensation perspective than what we were dealing with during COVID. And I do think,
would agree,
a lot of the challenges we saw, particularly in SaaS, over the last year and a half, 2 years, was bound to happen. In fact, I remember you and I, we're always sort of like talking about things that are going on and trends that are going on and going toe to toe on things, agreeing, disagreeing. But I remember you and I having this conversation early on when we first met, about how, because I was looking for a new job when we chatted. And then I was like really worried about, what am I going to find? And things are starting to shift, whatever. Then I remember I was saying, there's no way this level of these salaries that these companies are willing to throw at candidates is going to stick. It is going to the bubble's going to burst. Because it reminded me of the housing bubble burst in the US in 2008, where people were just one-upping each other and paying, and all this money and driving up the cost of homes. And then what happened? The bubble burst and we went into a recession, and it was awful. And I was like, the same thing is going to happen from a labor perspective, because smaller companies, like, startup companies or smaller companies, can't afford those type of salaries. We're not Google. We're not on all Google and Amazon. And that's exactly what happened. The bubble burst.
It was truly, I saw some of the wildest salary offers because I was offering candidates roles, right? Like I also helped with
Yes.
recruiting Africans, and they'd be like, "Well, here are my three competing offers," and they would tell me what the salaries were, and I'd be like, "Well, I literally cannot compete with that. I don't know who could," but it was happening, especially for engineering hires. I saw some pretty wild offers out there.
Yeah, definitely on the technical side. I saw it mostly on that end, not as much in other areas, but definitely engineers, product managers. It was wild.
Yeah, people
I
were
never want to go back to that time, but I also remember like compensation was, I had like really dug into compensation in my role just before that, where like I owned all of compensation, was a
yeah,
company that we, helped
public.
support taking public. And then, so, which is like a whole other echelon when you're a public organization when I walked into this organization, they had thousands of people and across a number of countries and didn't have a job architecture,
Mm,
didn't have salary bands, didn't have unified leveling between these companies that they acquired. I mean, it was a mess. And when we started to build the job architecture, and we really started to dig in, well, one thing I found interesting was like, how did you acquire so many companies without having a clear architecture and leveling in your business to know that what you were paying, what multiplier you might have been paying for that organization was fair or not?
wow.
How did you assume that? How did you do that if you didn't even know what you were comparing against? But then the more I dug into it, the more I realized like how fiscally irresponsible the business had been in what I found to be extraordinary, because it is, we all know, in like salaries is like the number one expense,
Yep.
right, on a P&L
Yep.
in an organization, and they were that flippant about what they were paying people.
But that's like
It's
so
crazy.
many places I have been.
It is. I think for me, I will tell you, like I was surprised at how large of an organization didn't, and then a company that was like positioned to go public, how they had none of that. Like you sort of expect it when you're in a smaller company and you're like, okay, I'm going to build that at home. I couldn't believe seeing that in such a large company that was positioned to go public and that was across a number of countries and bought a high number of companies without ever really considering that. Like that was what I thought was very shocking and dangerous.
I really am not shocked by that because I'm just like, I am not surprised the amount of people who didn't, maybe, okay, maybe like 5 years ago, because I feel like compensation has really in the last 5 to 7 years, I don't know about you, like really become a conversation piece, especially because I think just looking at Gen Z wanting to
Yeah.
know more and
Yeah.
the employees starting to get smarter and asking questions, and then these pay transparency laws being passed, which I love and I'm in support of. But I just feel like in the last 5 to 7 years, a lot of HR teams have been like, holy cow, we need to get it together now.
Yeah. So before I joined that company too, what was that? Oh, I guess that was my last company. Before that, I was in management consulting, particularly like within government contracting, obviously in the DC area, which is very different, right? Because you have to bid, like what we were providing, our product was people delivering services to the government. And so that was always a very interesting, and if I ever were to go back to that industry, I think it would be really interesting to see to think about how I think about it all the time. Like, how would I approach compensation in that environment where you have the data and you can use all the data and you can have a job architecture and then you bid, right? Because you're bidding basically on like, most of the contract that you're bidding against is really going to be the cost of labor for the people. But then like you're competing against other big companies, and then people are like, okay, I'll slash this by 2% or I'll slash this by 3% or 5. And where does that slashing come from? 9 times out of 10, it's coming from what you're able to pay people. And at the end of the day, you're making your revenue based on people being in seat delivering services to the government. And so it's a very different perspective on compensation, and really hard, I think, to take a similar approach that we do on the SaaS side or in a lot of other areas, because your product isn't your people necessarily. Your product is a product, versus on the other side, your product is your people, and you're bidding people on a contract, not a product. So it's just a very interesting dynamic and a big shift. I talk about this a lot with our our mutual bestie Halai as well, because she's still in that space. And it's like always something that she's like really strategizing on, and how do we do this differently while also being like fair and equitable, and thinking about, okay, well, these are the generations that we're working with now. Like they're not going to just like take anything, and they're looking for a very holistic package. So I know this is something, her being head of people, now COO, she's got sort of all of this under her oversight. It's something that she's consistently sort of thinking about.
Dude, you all have seen some shit. That's why whenever you all are like, "I'll come on this podcast," I'm like, "Get on this podcast. Everyone needs to hear it." We've all seen it. There is not a damn thing in this world that surprises me anymore. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
I lost the ability to be shook by anything. I just saw Baby Girl, that Nicole Kidman movie, and I
I
was like,
haven't seen it yet.
that's for another day. That's
Okay. I haven't seen
that's
it.
an HR After Dark conversation.
Oh, okay. We should do an HR After Dark podcast.
HR After Dark about Baby Girl, because I could tell you my thoughts, okay? But it was, let me just say, nothing shocks me anymore in this life. That's all I got to say. I'll let it go.
Might still be a little naive in some ways, because I still get shocked.
No.
But then people are always shocked that I get shocked, because they're like, why are you like this, Sarika? Like, you just truly, I think I like truly need to believe that people are better than like that. Yeah. I like need to be surprised by people, because otherwise, like, I'll get real down on like humanity.
I've just like lost it. I'm just like, oh, they did that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. But remember, HR hasn't always been I haven't always, in my 20 plus years of working, I have not spent the whole time in HR. So I think still things surprise me, because I've been in a little less time than you have.
I aspire for people to tell me a story that truly makes my jaw drop. Actually, my friend did tell me an HR story. I will not repeat it here. But the gist of the story was like an employee basically propositioned their manager. And the manager was like, this is inappropriate. And when she told me the whole story, I was jaw on the floor at the things that she had to go investigate. And that did surprise me. But moving on to things that don't surprise me. A job title doesn't define who someone is. There's so much more to someone's story than what they do for work. In fact, I often say what I do for work is probably the least interesting thing about me. And I bet some of your employees may feel the same. Jamie in IT, she's not just about fixing tickets. And Mike in sales, he's more than hitting quotas. Every employee has a story. Every employee has talents, motivations, and potential waiting to be unlocked. And that's where the predictive index comes in. PI helps you understand the whole person, creating stronger managers and happier teams. And we all know when you truly understand your people, your business can actually perform better. Check out trypi.com/IHateItHere to learn more. Moving on and back to compensation, as we just did a little tailspin outside. We're back. Okay. So
we're back.
We've been talking about like how you think about compensation. So when you're creating a good pay package for employees, like what makes it so challenging?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think it's always been challenging. I think it's especially challenging because you and I talk about this a lot. There's a lot of generations in the workforce, right? We've got, I think, 5 generations in the workforce.
Yeah.
And we've actually, I think we did this on a podcast or something. And I know you did this with Hi Bob actually last year at Transform, about the different generations desiring different things. But if you really look at the root of it, we all sort of want the same thing. We just went at it differently. And right. And so I think but ultimately I think that is what makes it challenging, because that means you have people at different points of different phases in their lives. Like what I valued about work and my pay or my total rewards or total comp package when I was 21 was fundamentally different when I was 27, 30, 35, and where I'm at now. And I would have valued probably more money and more like take home pay then. Whereas now I'm looking at benefits, I'm looking at my 401k matching, I'm thinking about I have kids and I'm getting older and I want to make sure that I can I have a retirement and right. And so that makes it challenging because you have to think about the different personas that you have in an organization. Very similarly, how you might talk about a product, right? Like when we hear this a lot, we have friends obviously in the space that look at people like product, like look at, how product managers look at building a product. Like, who is your ICP? Who is your ideal customer profile? And then you build persona. Marketing or product marketing comes in and they build those personas around that ICP. And then how you message them and how you get their attention is going to ultimately be different based off of like the different characteristics of their persona. It's the same approach when you think about designing appropriate comp packages or total rewards packages and where you choose to invest. When you think about the personas of your organization, who are the different people I have in my organization? What different generations? What makes up those different personas? What do they value? What do they not value? And what we're also seeing, we talked about this, younger generations. I actually shouldn't even say that because I think it's at this point, I actually think it's generation agnostic.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on where people are in their lives, where some people really desire, I really need to be remote working, or I need to have flexibility in my schedule. I will take less money in my base or less of a bonus if it means that I can work remote, or if it means that I have more flexibility in my day because I have children or I have ailing parents or whatever that might be. Right. And so they will value maybe some of the non-financial components of a package, where someone that is like coming right out of like college might value more about, no, I need as much money as I can get because I need to pay my bills. I value I value having like a really strong 401k matching because I want to start putting away for, I want to make sure I can capitalize on that. Or, hey, maybe you're someone that has a lot of, medical health challenges, or someone in your family does. And so your benefits and medical or dental is really going to be important to you. Right. And so that is what I think makes it challenging, because people inherently value things differently, and they will put different sort of multipliers on and make decisions based off of those personal values. That's what makes it difficult. But as someone in HR, our job is to really get in there and understand who the people in our organization are, talk to them. And there's all different mediums, and it really is going to be depending on what size of organization you are. We're a little bit smaller. We're like 160, 170 people. And so, yes, we do survey, and I do value our surveys, and we action against those surveys. We don't just like listen. We don't just take it and then like don't talk about it. Like, we actually value that. But I also try to make sure that I'm talking with as many employees as I can, talking and hearing from candidates that my talent acquisition team is talking to. Like, what are the things that you're hearing? What are the things that candidates are asking for? Right. And so like, I get my information in a lot of different ways from a lot of different mediums, but that's important because that's what's going to help us determine what those personas are. So that every year when I go to look at, okay, here's our benefits, here's our comp philosophy, here's our non-financial things, like here are the things we're doing well, here are the things that we're not doing well on, here's where we might choose to invest differently because people really care more about these things versus these things. That's how we design what we find to be the most competitive package that we can. And I think what's hard is there are some organizations out there that will not negotiate. They're like, this is what it is, and you either take it or you don't. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I also think it can also be challenging if you haven't historically done that. It's hard to make that transition. And so I think there are also moments where you can negotiate some of those elements when you're talking to candidates, but you still have to take into consideration internal equity and the salary bands, because those really put guardrails in place to make sure that you're staying fair and equitable. And so where I might have a candidate that values more take-home pay, like I want more in my base salary than maybe I do in my bonus, right? Great. Let's talk about how we might be able to do that. I still have to work within the confines of what is the budget that we have set for this role. And what is the internal, what does the market bear for this role? I'm not going to pay you more and so much more than maybe someone else in this role internally. And your experience doesn't really lend me to like need to pay you that much just because you desire that. Right. And so again, balancing act, art and science, it's a little bit, you got to sort of like, this is why you've heard me say this. I like still laugh at myself, kind of embarrassed, like cringe a little bit, like at my like total passionate moment when we did the pay scale keynote. And I was like, everyone on my team, everyone needs to understand how compensation works. This is why I'm so passionate about it. Like my recruiters understand compensation very, very, very well. And it's important that they do, right? Because these are the kinds of conversations they need to be able to have. And they need to be able to have those they need to be able to negotiate, but they also need to bring our hiring managers along, our business leaders along, right? Because they don't always understand that. They're like, why? Just give them that. I need this role. I need it yesterday. So go do it. And it's like, well, hold on a second. I understand you need this role and I really want to help you, but hey, I can't do this because X, Y, and Z. And we're we're a smaller team than we once were when I first started. And so I need for everybody on my team to understand that, especially my recruiters, because I need them to be able to own those conversations and also own that with their hiring managers. So you're not having to bring me or everybody, because that's just like time consuming and inefficient. But also I think it's important for everybody to have a very well-rounded view of that, which is also why you also hear me talking about education being super important, such that everybody in the business knows and understands compensation, not just my HR team, not just my executive leadership team, and not just managers. You need employees to understand that. And you need to also find ways to make sure that you can educate candidates along the way as well, because there's a lot of companies that won't do that. And I believe that's a fundamental part of an improved candidate experience, is communicating and also educating candidates along the way.
And an improved employee experience. You
100%.
don't want someone to start and then them accept an offer thinking they're underpaid, and then you're fighting an uphill battle their entire employee journey, proving to them they're not underpaid.
Oh, yes. And I know one of the questions you're going to ask me is like, what are the things that employees like don't always understand? And that's a very important question, because this is the challenging part of compensation. And I think it can be challenging to do this when you're also trying to rebuild trust with an organization, or you're trying to build trust in general, because compensation and because you're not always dealing with the decisions that you make in the organization.
Yes.
You have to deal with the decisions and the perceptions that people bring into the organization from other terrible organizations.
I could go blue in the face explaining to employees, I cannot retroactively fix decisions that I did not make. What I can do is write the decisions for the future so that all of you achieve, so it's equitable for everyone moving forward.
Right.
But like, I didn't make the decisions for the people who came before me. Like, how can you hold me accountable for that?
The people that came before you, but also decisions and the perception that you have about HR, or the perception that you might have about compensation from another organization altogether, because they didn't do it well, right? Yeah. Like, I can't fix your perception. I can fix the perception because I'm going to educate, but I can't, like, you have to be willing to meet me halfway, and you have to be willing to trust me, which is why, like, building trust in general as like a more holistic sort of takeaway is so important. And I didn't post a lot on LinkedIn. I didn't post on LinkedIn at all these last, week and a half that I've been off, and very intentionally, but of course I was still on LinkedIn. And it really frustrates me, the different things that I stumbled across and I see it all the time, but I saw it a lot again, sort of. I think everyone's like, oh, what did you learn from 2024? And what do you hope for 2025? But it's like so much misperceptions about HR, and how, because people have had bad experiences with HR in places. So those of us that are doing it well and doing it right and trying to be fair and trying to be transparent and trying to educate, it's like we're constantly coming from behind, because I'm paying for the sins of some other organization or some other terrible leader. And that's what makes our jobs really, really difficult. It was funny because I finally listened actually to the podcast we did with you on like our wish for 2025 for HR. And, our friend Noah talking about his wish last year was like improving the candidate experience. And he's like, that's still my freaking wish for 2025. And it is so upsetting to me, because I know exactly what he's talking about, but also, like, I can say this and I will toot this horn all day, every day. My talent acquisition team here at Vidyard is one of the best I've ever worked with, truly. And I don't have a big team. I have 2 recruiters and I have a recruitment leader. But I got to tell you, and also one of the recruiters was like she was like an entry level. Like, she was actually a people ops coordinator when she first started with us 2 years ago, and then has done a lot of different things. And then is like, I really like recruitment. I want to continue to grow in that area. Right. but like the amount of like passion and empathy that they have for our candidates, which drives them to always be very conscientious about the candidate experience and community. It's something that we are all maniacal about, even being a smaller team. Like we are crazy about it. We're using Vidyard, our own Vidyard products, AI avatars, any which way that we can to make sure that we are staying in constant communication with candidates so that they have a different experience and we can teach them along the way so that it's better for them in the next experience, even if they don't. I mean, I've had so many people reach out to me truly on LinkedIn and said, I've been interviewing with Vidyard. I didn't get the job, but I got to tell you, like, it was so amazing to be rejected by you all, because like all the feedback I got, but then all the resources you provided on like what I need to think about for my next opportunity, or like whatever that might be, like coaching, mentorship, got information about compensation. Here's how you need to think about it. Here are the elements. It's like, it's not that, it really isn't that hard to do, to be right, to like teach people and like empower them. I just wish that more HR teams and HR leaders cared enough to do this, because if we all just did a little bit better, like 1% to 2% better, it would have such a net positive impact, I believe, on the world of work and also the candidates' experience and how the candidates show up, on this side of when they come into like interview, or how it's just so frustrating.
Well, I mean, I always say we start from the negative. With every single person, I don't ever start from a neutral position. I start from a negative position, because every single person remembers how other HR teams have treated them. And I feel like I myself it makes me sad sometimes when I hear about people who have had negative experiences at companies that I've worked at where I've been the HR leader, but I'm like, ultimately, I'm not perfect. But the other piece of it is like, there's two sides to every story. I love that saying, that like somewhere in the middle is the truth. And I think employees have a lot of misunderstandings about compensation, work, what's actually within my control, what's actually within my purview. Like, I think that is just such a thing that we're up against all the time. And then they've been badly treated by other HR teams, so they just assume the worst in us.
That's right.
And I'm like tired of it, honestly. I mean, I can't fix it, but my
It
thing
is
is like,
frustrating, and it's those bad experiences or those bad leaders
yeah,
who are empowered by other bad leaders, because that's ultimately what it's about, is why we're seeing this sort of rise. Maybe this is just like the, peaks and valleys of like the market, but like this whole new age, like these tech founders that are coming out, like, I don't need HR.
I laughed
I just
so
need a
hard.
lawyer. I don't need HR to do. Really? I want to see how long it takes you to not have, because, and I with so much conviction believe that's because they have not worked with good HR leaders.
Yeah.
Because for all those terrible experiences, think about the amazing experiences. Like, I use HubSpot as an example all the time, because, and am I saying that like HubSpot is perfect? No, I haven't worked there, right? And I don't, I'm sure it's not perfect. No organization can be, because we're not in business to make every employee happy. We're there to make sure that we are empowering people to make the best decisions to drive the business outcomes that we set out every year to, like, this is our goal for the year. Because ultimately, when the business performs, the business hits their goals, that means there's more money to reinvest, and ultimately employees will be more happy and satisfied. Like, that's what I'm trying to get employees to understand. But I always admired their previous CPO, Katie Burke. Because I still feel this way about her. I always found when she spoke on podcasts or in like, any type of sort of public forum, I never felt like she was kowtowing to employees. I always felt like she took a very practical and honest approach that was empathetic, but also very still oriented around the business.
Yeah.
She found a really great way to communicate with the organization in a way that it was very, and because I think she spent a lot of time probably building trust over time, where she's like, we're going to do these things, but here are the guardrails. Like, yeah, we've heard this feedback, like remote work. Okay, great. People want to, but hey, we're going to give you guys choice. And whatever you choose at the start of the year, whether it's remote, hybrid, or in office, is what you are for that whole year. I think you can change like maybe one time. There were guardrails, right? And it was like, and we are going to hold to that. And let me explain to you why we're doing that. We make decisions as a business. We make investment decisions, budgetary decisions da 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 da. And I sort of stuck to it. But I always loved, and that's just one example that always stuck out to me because they stuck to their guns. And it was not like, oh, because an employee started complaining, we're just going to give in to them because that's how we're going to keep employees engaged. No, no, that isn't the best way to keep employees engaged, because every time you do that, you've made an exception for someone that now you've now pissed somebody else off that you didn't make an exception for. And maybe that other person is a high performer. And now you just lost that high performer from high performance because they're like, you just made an exception for someone that isn't even performing and you won't make this exception for me. Bye. Like, there are puts and takes, but I think people often forget, like, we are also, we're employees also, but no, I'm not here as just a steward to protect the business. I'm no different than any other business function leader. I am here to empower the people and other leaders to be able to drive to our business outcomes that we are all together trying to drive towards collectively.
Yeah.
It's just right. Like how we do that in the frame of our function is all going to look a little bit different. And I just wish that more people could just approach it that way. But yeah, I know we've gone off on a tangent, but.
No, this is actually very relevant because I want to know from you, what else do you think employees often misunderstand about our pay and benefits and how they're determined?
Everything. Like everything. I mean, like, so, okay. This is one. So I think it depends on like where you're thinking about it. So I think when you're a candidate coming into an organization, oftentimes and I've done this, I have made this mistake and have learned the hard way, where I'm so focused on the title that I'm getting, or I'm so focused on the salary that I'm going to get, that I don't look at my entire package. I don't look at, okay, how much is benefits going to cost me here versus what it costs me right now at my current organization? Do I get this? Do I get a 401k? Do I get 401k matching? Do I get the same type of matching? If I don't, okay, well, how much matching? How much will the company match? Okay, so how much am I not able to put away? Or, or if I max out, can I still max out? Like, oh, okay, that takes down my taxable income. Okay, but if I can't bring down my taxable income, how much am I getting impacted by taxes at the end of the year that I'm going to have to pay that I didn't think about paying? Like, it's things like that younger talent isn't always going to think about. And I didn't think about that, but people are not thinking about, what does my benefits cost me and what does that impact my takeaway? Like, how does that impact my bottom line as far as my take home pay? That's like one big thing that a lot of people make that decision. And so it's something that my recruiters talk a lot about. Hey, make sure you look at these things when you're comparing your packages, like, because we want people to know. And some people have asked me, why would you do that? Because I want people coming into our organization, eyes wide open, knowing exactly who we are as a business, exactly where we are as a business, what type of culture we are. And I want you to be happy and excited joining this organization. I don't want you to come in and feel like we pulled the wool over your eyes in any which way, right? And I think that's super important, because that makes a difference in how someone might does or does not show up and how productive they are or not going to be very quickly inside of the, and also my company is Canadian based. And so if you have to exit someone, regardless of the reason, you're always on the hook to pay some type of severance. Yep. Whereas in the US, you're not, right? So it does cost you money. There is the cost of doing business differently in Canada than it is in the US as well. I would say this is a big one for me, and it is like a soapbox moment for me. I find that, especially when you're in a smaller you're in a smaller organization that's building and scaling. And I love building and scaling. I love coming into, smaller organizations where they are growing and they've got money to invest in that growth and that scale, because I've done this a number of times and I really enjoy it, because I feel like you see immediate impact when you can build that type of scale. But the one thing that's always interesting is everybody always we want transparency, right? Whether it's pay or whether it's in the decisions we make as leaders and why we make these decisions, and, financial transparency, right? And we want fairness and equitability. We want things to be equitable and fair, right? We believe in DE&I and all the good stuff. Great, me too. Yes, I love this. But you can't always have fairness and equitability, especially when it comes to compensation, if you don't put process and policy in place, right? That's why having a compensation philosophy is important, because you're documenting what you are saying are your pay practices, what you believe in, and how you're going to anchor your practices, your processes, and your policies. And then it is very transparent internally and externally. Everybody knows, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you have that. But you can't have equitability. I can't manage internal equity if I don't have a job architecture, if I don't have clear bands, if I don't abide by those bans, if I don't think about how my approach is to hiring against those bans, what those target hiring ranges are, if I don't have a policy on how someone can get promoted, what do you have to do to get promoted with these as much of a objective criteria as you can give them. Well, that means you need a performance process if you're doing pay for performance, which most companies do. Like, you don't realize how much this spiders into so many other elements of what we do in HR.
Everything.
Everything. So then you start to build process, right? And it doesn't have to be heavy process, right? But when you come in an organization that is used to not having a process, and it's like, I'm going to make decisions, but I'm going to fly by the seat of my pants, or I'm making decisions because I might know this co-founder, or I might be really good friends with this director and this guy, right? And that's how you're making decisions. Bias, right? And then you start to build even a little bit of process so that you can be more equitable and 1% better every day. And you really can stand by those decisions and explain why you made those decisions and start to make those decisions more consistently, not reducing the exceptions that you're making, all that, right? That is interesting to me, that at that point, especially employees that have been in an organization a long time and they were here when there wasn't any process or policy, and now that there is even a little bit, oh, there's so much red tape. Oh my God, this HR leader came in and put all this red tape and they're slowing things down and this isn't fair. And why can't I have this money? In the past, I would get these 10% raises because I'm a really good performer, even though you have no performance process with no objective criteria. But I was a great performer because my manager told me so, because I've been here for 10 years.
It's my worst nightmare.
I will tell you, that is the hardest thing I've had to overcome in organizations.
Yeah.
From not having any kind of process. I say that I actually should go back, and I misspoke. I said it, I positioned it as like a smaller company that maybe didn't have process that you're starting. I've done it where I walked into a company that was 2,500 people that didn't have it. And I had to build it with my team.
Yeah.
Right. And so, which is even harder because you think about 2,500, that's a different level of scale that you're having to overcome. That to me is where I really want employees. I really want candidates. I really want everybody to hear me. I am not building process for process sake. I am building process so that I can uphold the policies that we have put forward and abide and adhere to a philosophy that is very transparently communicated on our website, on our internal Confluence pages, or whatever you use to communicate data and information about your policies and practices. Because I want you to hold me accountable to that. I want you to call me out and say, well, why you made an exception for this person? Why did you make that exception? Call me out on it. But also because I believe in transparency, and I believe that we should be equitable. And I believe this is how you hold yourselves accountable and equitable, and how you reduce bias in an organization. So this is I think that's the biggest hurdle to get over, is people understanding that. And where it tends to show up is when you get time for raises. Yep. Or when now we put a performance process in place and we've built, okay, here's as much objective criteria as I can put in. There's always going to be subjectivity around performance reviews, because ultimately you're asking for other people to assess somebody's performance. And in some cases, if you have a goal process, you can say yay or nay, and you put some kind of quantifier around that, or you have KPIs, right? But there are some roles that might not have as clear financial or numerical KPIs. So how do you measure that? There's also the behaviors and the competencies you expect for people to be able to build and demonstrate over time, especially as they move into senior level roles. I want to make sure that someone that goes into a leadership role has proven that they can mentor people, has proven that they can effectively communicate and bring people along and inspire and influence effectively, right? There's some of those things that are not necessarily always objective, but things you have to observe by their behaviors and what outcomes they're driving.
Yeah.
But what happens is, let's say you have someone that's really killing it and they've exceeded the expectations, but they're not ready for a promotion, or maybe they don't want a promotion yet, and they're at the top end of their band.
Yeah, what do you do then?
And then you have a pay for performance model. And so we have a merit matrix. And this merit matrix gives in, okay, here's the rating that they got in their performance review, and here's their comp ratio. Here's their placement in their band. They're in the top end of their band. So I can only give you a 3% increase. Otherwise, you're going to be outside of your band. And I can't continue to give you increases outside of your band because now it's become inequitable because you're getting paid for labor and for the job that is above what the market bears for this role, even at the highest level. That is what has been the hardest challenge for me, even in my current organization, to help educate people on is this: what does pay for performance mean? And what does that mean against when it comes time to raise it? I can't give you a 10% raise. Someone that's going to get 10% is probably someone that's going to that's getting promoted because they've gone above and beyond their current role and started to lean into those expectations at that next role. And they're really, going hard, and they're taking on a lot of extra stuff to get to that next level, to prove to us that they can take on that next level's responsibilities, right? That's why we have you do that, because we want to make sure that we're setting you up for success. I'm not trying to suck labor out of you for free. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do is make sure you're comfortable at that next level. And then I'm going to reward you for that by paying you and giving you a promotion with a decent raise and promoting you to that next level in a way where you feel much more comfortable what you're walking into. And we feel more comfortable that we've set you up for success because you've had a taste of what it means to be at that next level. But then again, if you're someone that's still doing really well, but you don't want to get promoted and you've topped out your band, I can't give you more money because now you're going to be inequitable at a certain point if I pay you outside of that band.
But I want it, Sarika. I want more money.
I want to give you more money. Here's how we're going to do that. You need to aspire to get, or it becomes at certain organizations when you like max out on your band. And by the way, our bands are wide. We have like a 30%.
Yeah.
We have like a 30% end to end in a band, 50% above and beyond the midpoint, which is a decent size. That's a decent size band. A lot of other organizations might do like 15 and 20%. And also the other thing is bands are supposed to overlap. That was the other thing that employees, especially my engineers, were trying to like quantify. Oh, well, then let me figure out what my band is here. Why are you doing that? The bands are supposed to overlap. Why are they? I don't think that's right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you became a compensation expert overnight. I thought you were an engineer. I don't tell you how to do your job as a front-end engineer. Don't tell my team how to do compensation. Right? And so, but that is one that I would say that's a big one that people just don't understand.
I would say the average employee does not understand how their pay got determined. The average employee does not understand how their pay is determined.
Which is why education is so important. And that is why, I mean, this obviously, this whole idea of me starting to post more about like debunking compensation myths, which right now is like temporarily gone into like, let me deep dive step by step how to write a compensation philosophy. This whole thing birthed from the conversation we had in our little HR besties group on like, I want to post more about this. I feel like people need to understand this more, but there's other people posting about it. So what do I have to say? And it's like, women were like, what, Sarka? You have a lot to offer. You've seen this in different industries. You need to start posting about it. And I couldn't believe how many people were reaching out about this. Now I haven't quite figured out the LinkedIn algorithm because sometimes I feel like a lot of people are like paying attention, and sometimes I feel like my posts go nowhere. I can't figure that out.
I'm the same way. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just gonna. Actually, we all know this. I treat LinkedIn like Facebook. I'd be commenting LOL on people's posts.
Oh, I know.
But people would be like writing thought pieces, and I'd be like, so today sucked. That's
I know, right? But I care about it more from the context of like, I want to get this out to as many people as possible, to as many candidates, as many employees, as many HR people as I can, in the hopes that we could be different and do it differently.
Yeah, but I think the problem or the hardship for me is like we all end up inheriting systems that we would have never chosen. Like I've inherited decisions that I would have never made. And then I'm being held accountable by these employees for these decisions that I didn't make. And then when I do build a system that then ensures everyone is paid and leveled equitably, then I get flack for the fact that they're not getting 20% raises. And I'm like, I think that we do a disservice sometimes when it comes to compensation on like being kind and afraid of saying the hard thing. And that Brene Brown quote always sticks in my head, like clear is kind. You should sit an employee down and say, we really care, like we really value your work, but you are leveled and paid for exactly the job that you currently have. And therefore I can't give you a raise, or you don't get a 10% raise. But I think a lot of people, especially like young leaders, are afraid to have that conversation because they're afraid of talent leaving. And the thing I like to remind people is like, we're all replaceable. I'm replaceable. Everyone is replaceable. What isn't replaceable is you diminishing the trust with your employees by making exceptions to your compensation philosophy. And then it gets out, and then any trust that you've even built is lost when your employees start talking to each other, because guaranteed they are talking to each other about their compensation, and they should.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We can't stop that and we shouldn't,
And we
right?
should
Like
encourage it, honestly, because then they'll all find out they're getting paid equitably. Like they understand the system now.
totally. They know that we're not cheating them because I take this very seriously. You're completely spot on. It's just this is like the hill I'll die on. It's like, this is why educating and communicating, and like you said, clear as kind. I will even tell you, like, we had to make really tough decisions as an organization a little over a year ago. And I was even scared, you know, I was more worried about trying to rebuild trust and re-engage employees, but like trying to, give in to every whim and like every piece of feedback, like internalize it and go to my executive, my fellow executive, like, we got to do this. And they're just, and like we all sort of fell into that trap because, we felt bad. We had to make such tough decisions in the business, and we had to let people go that we didn't want to let go. And it was like heartbreaking and awful and hard. And look, yeah, there are bigger companies and there are CEOs out there who don't give a shit about their people, and they can lay off people every 3 months and it really doesn't bother them. They don't lose sleep at night. I know that there are those CEOs out there. That is not my CEO. That is not my fellow executive team. That is not how we operate. And so it really impacted us and it really hurt us. And we really wanted to rebuild camaraderie and trust, right? But I think inevitably what we found is like we were doing a disservice at a certain point. And I didn't feel true to myself at a certain point where it was like we're just sort of kowtowing to employees and being too scared to say anything, because if we say anything, they're going to quit. Well, you know what? At this point, like we all need to stand by our convictions. I feel very convicted in what we're doing and what we're building. And I think we're making decisions. We're trying to be quick to decisions that we make on how we're expanding the product, or what decisions we'll make or not make in terms of how we're investing in the product and how we're prioritizing our customers and our customer needs. I think that's what we needed to focus back on, is we got away from like, we need to prioritize our customers. It can't just be about the employee, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. But as a business, we are in business because we're building something of value that is solving a real problem for our customers. Okay. There's nothing wrong with us saying that. There's nothing wrong with us living by that and holding and being convicted by that. Because that doesn't mean that as we prioritize the customer and the customer's needs and driving value through our product in that way, that we don't care or value our employees. In
It's
fact,
not, yeah.
it's actually the opposite. I care just as deeply for our employees, because if we orient around customer obsession and building value for that customer and solving a problem that they have, that means we're going to continue to sell our product. We're going to continue to make money that we can reinvest in the business for our people. And that is another thing that I think our employees are not understanding. I don't have unlimited budget to pay you. The budget is based off of what our revenue is and whether we hit our growth targets or we don't. And we don't even have we have like these like insane growth. We're like pretty like fair like targets. But it's like damned if you do and damned if you don't. And at the end of the day, it's like I feel like we got to a place where employees want everything and they don't realize that everything comes at a cost. Everything they do, every decision we make comes at a cost. And we're humans just like you are. And we're doing the best that we can with the information that we have. And we're making big bets because we need to. And that's what it means to be, that's what it means to be a founder or an entrepreneur. You're making big bets, but ultimately we're making big bets not just to line the pockets of our leaders, but because we want to make money to reinvest in the business for our people. And but I don't have a limited budget. And so, yeah, I can't just promote you nilly-willy, whatever point in the year. I can't just give you raises just because you want one. And you're paid equitably. And I do pay equity analysis twice a year, sometimes more if I feel like the market has shifted a lot, right? Like you can't change every time the market changes, right? And also another thing is salary surveys are lagging. And so you don't get real-time information, because salary surveys, for people that don't know, are based off of are based off of companies that use that platform, that like you basically pay to play, essentially. Like you have to fill out your salary surveys every year, and that's how those companies, those compensation platforms, get data. They get the data by the companies that are on the platform that pay to get that information, and you only get that so many times a year. So like even as the market might shift, the salary survey data won't shift that frequently. Right. And so like, even if I were to do it on a quarterly basis, which I wouldn't, because that is a very time consuming thing. I don't have like a straight up compensation team to do that. But we always make sure that we do a pay equity analysis to make sure that people are always sort of like in line. But again, I always have to, one thing I always am clear on, it's also dependent on what the budget is. How much money do I have to invest in this? And I know what the budget is at the beginning of the year, and I make decisions on our processes. Like, can we do a mid-year promotion cycle or can we not? Can we do mid-year or can we not? I make those decisions based off of what budget do I have at my fingertips.
Yeah. I'm having so much fun talking about this.
We've been doing this for
yeah, we've been doing this for, we're going on an hour. We could talk forever about this. Okay, now I want to do a rapid fire round where I'm going to take some of my questions and do them rapid fire. Do you think companies should be open about how much they pay their employees?
I do, but there's a but there. Every organization is different. Every organization's culture and their DNA is different. Their appetite for how much transparency they can give or desire is different. And I think that's okay. Compensation or pay transparency is on a spectrum. I have always said this. You've heard me say this in a number of forums now. I am a progressive HR leader, but I am not the HR leader that is going to say everybody's pay is public and everybody can see everything, because I think that somebody's personal pay, their compensation, is their PII, is their personal identifiable information. They should choose if they want to share that information for a host of reasons. As a minority woman, I don't want my information out there. I want to choose to share who I choose to share that with, who I feel safe with. And there are a lot of people who feel very similar to me. What I do think should be transparent, and I think at the very least, employees should know what their compa ratio is and what a compa ratio means. And I think they should know what their own personal salary bands are. And I think, and that's what we do inside of my own organization. And I think one thing I know we're continuing to work on in our organization is having all the bands public, not people's place in the band, but at least having all of our bands public and what jobs reside in what band. So you could just sort of see that, because I don't think that necessarily tells you exactly who's where. And I think that's important for people to have like a more holistic approach. But again, this is the hill I die on. You cannot have effective pay transparency without education at all levels of the organization. Don't just put it on your managers, but everybody needs to have some level of education, and all of that should be documented and written down so people can go back and relook at it and ask questions. But yes, I do think that even without the law being the law, and there's going to be more pay transparency laws being passed in and out of the US, it's happening in Canada every day now. I do think there should be a level of transparency.
Love it. Okay. Non-money rewards. So we've talked a lot about compensation. We've touched a lot on the actual dollars and cents of it all. But what are some non-money rewards that companies can offer to make employees feel valued?
Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many. This is where your personas and understanding your people come into play. So flexible working hours, remote work for people that still desire it, or hybrid. Some people want a blend of the two. PTO policies, whether they're unlimited PTO, flexible PTO, making sure it's clear you must take at minimum 20 days a year, whatever that might look like. Training and development opportunities, whether that's a stipend or that's opportunities for training and development that you put on throughout the course of the year, is another non-financial reward. Building clear career paths, pay transparency and education around it is also a competitive advantage. Recognition programs that are not always tied to money, but maybe just like people being able to recognize each other, mental health days, wellness stipends, wellness sessions, retirement, financial planning, financial wellness, bringing, external people in to teach all different ages in your organization how to manage their money differently, how to manage their money better. Those are things that I think are intangibles that everybody needs to understand that may not cost money. There's a lot of financial planners out there who will do that for free for like marketing purposes of their own services. There's a lot of opportunity. I think those are paid volunteer days. I know we do that. Those are a number of different non-financial perks and benefits you can get.
I love that. Thank you for answering my rapid fire round. I love to end every episode with advice or future. So I want to ask you, you're deeply embedded in this. You are my comp guru queen. How do you think pay and rewards for employees will change in the next few years?
Yeah. So I know we touched on this. I think pay transparency is is continually getting passed different states, different countries, different provinces inside of those countries. So I think that will continue to evolve, which is going to force more organizations into some level of pay transparency, whether they're wanted or not. But it's great because I think we're seeing. You already mentioned. I think we're seeing more HR leaders take note, paying attention. I think we're going to see smaller and smaller organizations, startups investing more in this as a foundational element of HR and people and culture, and I think and how they do business, which I think is important. I think we're going to continue to see sort of like personalization at scale as it relates to total rewards. And I think that's has a lot to do with like treating your people strategy as a product strategy and understanding like the different personas and in your organization and what they value and like how do you craft personalized type of reward packages that are still like, not biased and they're allowing for everybody to have a little bit of everything that they're excited about. And I don't think we've heard the last of like remote work, hybrid, whatever. But what I do think is going to happen if people choose to continue to do remote work, or maybe people are going backwards and okay, we'll offer remote work. You'll see people make adjustments in the salary. Whereas I think there's a lot of companies where okay, you remote work and I just pay U.S. national average. I think we'll start to see more people being like, okay, fine, you want to be a remote worker? Well, I'm going to pay you for the cost of labor in your particular area, not the U.S. national average. I'm going to pay where you reside and that'll be a way where, okay, we'll give you what you want, but then also we may not pay the same, we might not pay as competitively, or we'll pay competitively for your area, which might not be a high cost of living area, which I think is fair. But I think you'll see more of the geographic differentials come into play than maybe we've seen in a post-COVID world, in COVID and a post-COVID world. Those are some things that I think we will see. But I do think we will see more focus around education, around compensation, and I think we'll see more HR folks across the spectrum of all levels lean in more and learn more about compensation and how to bring this into their organization, which I think is a wonderful thing. And I am here for it. And check me out on LinkedIn because I'm happy to provide as much guidance. I'm working on some guidance and guidebooks and resources based off of y'all's encouragement. So that'll be coming soon.
Amazing. Well, this has always been one, it's always a blast to talk to you, but this has just been so fun. You have shared a lot and taught me quite a bit and left me with a lot of food for thought, honestly. Like, I
Really?
think compensation can always be improved. And so I'm always thinking about how can I communicate this better? Who do I need to tell more about this? Like, how do I make it clear? And we're hiring this many people. Like, how does everyone know
Okay.
why it
Question
is
for
that
you
they're doing
then.
this? Oh, okay.
What was something that I shared today that you felt like was something new that you learned that you hadn't thought about or
Oh my God, you're putting me on the spot. That's so mean of you. I actually thought when you said something about like your employee personas and what they want, I don't think I think about that enough, honestly. We have like a very young workforce in the sense that like a lot of them have been at startups before and kind of like get it. And I didn't really past this year really think more holistically about everything we were offering them and try and find better ways to communicate that. So when you said like personas this last time during open enrollment, we like made a real effort to like tell our employees, here are our plans. Here's what they mean. Here's the cost of it to you, because I felt like we weren't thinking about that in the past. And so this idea of personas, I want to go out and actually go map my employee base to like their personas and what it is that they want. Like, are they the ones that want to be motivated by compensation and want to be at the top band and they want to see more cash than experience type things? Are we like an employee base that cares more about healthcare? Like, I was actually surprised how many employees after we did open enrollment reached out and was like, oh my God, we have such good insurance.
yeah, you probably didn't think that younger talent even cares about that as much.
These are the things I wanted to hear. So I think like when you said persona and knowing your persona, I was like, damn, I feel like I know my employee base really well, but I think I actually need to make an effort to actually map those personas to what it is they want so that I can deliver better and more tailored communication and education around compensation.
Yeah, and like you said, you only have so much budget to use to invest in these things. You want to make sure that you're investing in the things that matter the most to the most amount of employees. You're never going to make everybody happy. That's not what you're here to necessarily do, but you do want to maximize and capitalize on and optimize those dollars for as many people as you can where it makes the most amount of impact for sure. And I've done that. I'll share with you. So actually that's something to think about. Another thing I can share is like templates for personas and like what are the types of things, the types of information you want to make sure that you gather about the personas in your business such that you use those like persona cards, because it also matters on like how you educate or how you drive change in the organization, because how you communicate to one persona might be different than another. And if you want to make the most impact in the quickest amount of time, like understanding who those people are and how they want to be communicated with or what values, like what's in it for me. It's always the with them for an employee. Like it'll allow you to like cater your communications and your change that way too.
I really have not persona mapped them. So you said that and I was like, I'm adding that to my 2025. Yeah. And I have everyone's bands. I just don't have their comp ratio. And I feel like that is something I could do. That's just such an easy win. So then, then I can roll out and say bands and comp ratios.
Yeah. And you can build that, and you can put that when you get to that place. We do it. We use HiBob as our HRIS. Shout out HiBob. I love them. But I know even, your HRIS system that you use, you can turn that feature on and show them what their compa ratio is, which was a big, it was scary for some of our other executives. But when we did the education, we realized it didn't cause that much disruption at the end of the day. I think there was a big like, oh, wow, okay. It wasn't so bad. Like we were really prepared. And I think people really understood, but then it also opened up a lot of really great questions from employees that I was like, great, I'm awesome. Like ask me these hard questions. Like I might not always have the answers and maybe I hadn't thought about something, but I'm also okay admitting to that. I'm human at the end of the day. Like I might not have thought about everything. And just because I really love comp and you guys call me a comp guru, I might not know everything. I'm still learning things all the time.
Same. I just learned I have to do my persona mapping and comp ratios. Like I literally am like, okay, 2 of my takeaways from this podcast episode, thought this was not work. This was supposed to be fun.
It is fun. I just wanted to make sure that I hit your objective that you laid out for this season's podcast. Is like you wanted to learn something that you didn't know.
You always teach me things though. I feel like every conversation with you, I'm like, fuck, I gotta go be better.
No, we all are in it together. Community, man. That's what we're here for.
2025. I need to come up with my 2025 motto. 2024 was more hangouts, less hangups.
Oh, yeah.
And I might have to come up with like a motto for 2025, like learn, but give yourself grace to be an idiot. Something good like that.
I like that. I think it needs to be something around like learning, growing, curiosity.
It's my core value.
Yeah. I think that's what if that's also the podcast theme for this next season. I can't believe I was the first of the season.
I know, but it comes out on January 6th, so I don't want to ruin you.
It's Monday. I know. There's going to be a lot of editing, I'm sure. We went off.
No, we did great. Okay, but now I'm going to have to say thank you because you're the best. Thank you for being here and sharing your information. People can find you on LinkedIn, right?
Find me on LinkedIn, Sarika Lamont. I will be posting. I posted more on compensation today. Check it out. Tell me what you think. Chime in.
Or message you. Thank you, Sarika, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.